Then 3 Hollywood, 1957. Buzzy Haller put down his unfinished burger at Barney's bar and turned his seat to watch some juvenile delinquent play a game of pinball. It was hot and bright outside, but in here it was the exact opposite. Buzzy was dressed in the casual style of most 25-year-old guys in Hollywood. A sport shirt, open at the neck, khaki slacks, and a dark blazer. His blonde flat-top crew cut needed trimming, and a closer look at his shoes revealed heels worn from too much walking. The door opened and Landis Woodley walked in. Light spilled through the breach like liquid fire, blinding everybody at the bar. Another figure materialized from the dazzling silver background, Neil Bugmere. "Oh shit," Haller muttered. "Here comes Princess Laughing Water." He took a swig of beer. Woodley sat on one side of Haller while Bugmere sat on the other. "Hello, Buzz," Bugmere said softly. "Aren't you glad to see me?" "Fuck no," Buzzy said flatly. Bugmere adjusted his skirt and began to peel away his white gloves. Woodley ordered 3 beers. Once the gloves were off, Neil flexed his fingers. "A little hot for gloves, ain't it?" Haller said. "Well," Bugmere replied, "I just don't feel fully dressed without them." The beers arrived. 2 guys farther down the bar stared at Bugmere with mouths agape. Buzzy hated that. Neil raised the frosted mug to his mouth and took several man-sized swallows of the beer. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down with the rhythm of his chugging. He drained half the glass in one pass and replaced the mug on the bar. It carried the vivid red lipstick traces of his constantly pouting cinema lips. He'd smudged his lipstick, and the stubble of his beard was beginning to poke through the Max Factor foundation and heavy powder. For a man who dressed as a woman, Neil Bugmere had an extremely heavy beard. His 5 o'clock shadow began to make its appearance around noon. It was hard being a transvestite in full drag in 1957, even in Hollywood, a place Buzzy Haller considered the last great fruitcake capital of the world. Neil noticed the 2 men staring at him and waved. "Christ, don't do that," Buzzy whispered. "It's bad enough I gotta be seen in public with you, but I got a drink here, you dig? These guys are probably gonna run into me later and start talking, you know what I mean?" Neil winked. "You're such a baby, Buzz. So they talk, who cares? What do you have to be afraid of?" Buzzy frowned. "My reputation, that's what. Believe it or not, I still get a lot of chicks around this town. Ask Woody." Woodley wrapped his hand around the mug of beer and smiled. "Don't get me involved in your little lover's spat, fellas. I got bigger fish to fry." "Shove it, Woody," Buzzy barked, loud enough for the 2 guys farther down the bar to hear. "Lover's spat, my ass." Neil laughed, a high lunatic titter that bordered on parody. "Exactly." "Shut up, you nutski," Haller roared. "The world's going straight to hell in a handbasket. It's getting so a guy can't even have a friendly drink anymore." Landis Woodley smoothed his oily black hair with a hand. He tended to use too much wild root cream oil, and the excess lubricated his palm. He wore a silver-grey short-sleeve sports shirt with a rolling dice motif. The vertical black stripe over the pocket and the hideaway buttons were the height of fashion. But no matter what he wore, he always looked like a bookie. Buzzy called it racetrack flash. At 26 years old, Landis Woodley was whippet thin and energetic. He wore a mustache, thin and sinister, because he thought that the chicks dug it. His eyes were beady, constantly moving, shaded by an awning of bushy eyebrows. They were the kind of eyebrows that would, in coming years, grow wild in every direction. Right now they were still reasonably obedient. The 3 men sipped their beers and watched highlights of the World Series on the indistinct black-and-white television screen behind the bar. "I hear the Dodgers are moving out here next year, and the Giants are going to San Francisco," Landis said. He liked to use his hands when he talked. So, who gives a shit? Bugmere cooed. It won't help make this town any hipper. I swear you'd think it was the Midwest around here, the way they carry on over my clothes. You're a fruitcake, Bugmere, Buzzy said. Get off my back, Neil replied. I was in the Marines, you know. I landed on the beach at Iwo Jima. Yeah? What were you wearing? Under my battle fatigues. Let me think. Black bra and panties, if my memory serves. I had my nylons in my pack. You're crazy. The bartender, who had been wiping glasses with a white towel and listening to the conversation, laughed. You kill me, Neil, you really do. He may be crazy, but he works cheap, Landis Woodley chimed in. Why don't you show Buzz the script rewrite, Neil? The man dressed as a woman reached into his oversized handbag and withdrew a sheaf of typewritten papers. He put them on the table and smiled. Best thing I ever did, he said proudly. Buzzy Haller belched loudly, scooped up the papers and began to read. You're not going to read it here, are you? Neil asked. Of course I am, Buzzy said, and then I'm going to have a pre-production meeting with myself and decide on a shooting schedule, then design and build the monster within the next 48 hours. Tonight's the party, Landis said slyly. You got the place all fixed up like last time? The bartender asked. Better. Ed, you won't believe it, Landis answered. Buzzy's got the treehouse rigged, the grounds, everything. Got something big planned? Landis smiled. I can tell you right now that this will be the greatest stunt in the history of Hollywood. Ed the bartender was impressed. You guys... You're unbelievable, you know that? Nobody does a party like you do. It's that hoodoo that you do, Buzzy joked, nodding at Landis. You're going, right? Neil asked. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Ed replied. Buzzy clapped his hands together. Man, I can't wait. I invited that cute little publicity girl from RKM, Roberta Bachman. Landis snorted. Why waste your time? You'll never get in her pants. Wanna bet? I'll bet, said Neil happily. But we'll need a witness. You guys are dreaming. She's as cold as a blue snow cone. Believe me, I've tried, Landis, the voice of reason, offered. Are you coming as a man or a woman tonight, Neil? I haven't decided. Some chicks dig that cross-dressing scene, but then again, it scares a lot of potential talent away. I can't imagine why, said Buzz, rolling his eyes at Ed. How about another round? Landis nodded. Speaking of scaring people, tonight should be the greatest. I've got some real beauties lined up. The torture chamber, bats, coffins, and my best prop yet, the guillotine. Better than last time? Asked the bartender as he delivered the frosted mugs to the thirsty patrons. Landis nodded. This one's the ultimate Eddie baby. I'm gonna roll some film too. Lubov's coming, Lana Wills, that Saturday night horror lady from Channel 2. What's her name? Davila, Neil interjected. Wow, Davila's coming. I watch her all the time. Man, this is gonna be great. I can't wait, the bartender replied. Best Halloween party on the planet. Did you check out the morgue? Landis asked Buzzy. Uh-huh. It's perfect. Really wonderful. Buzzy's eyes sparkled with excitement. I don't know why we never thought of it before. You should see this place. I swear, it looks like $1 million set. I talked to the guy there, and it's no problem. Seems that cop shows shoot there all the time, just never inside the abattoir. He said he'd be glad to help, that he wanted us to shoot there. Of course, I had to offer him a part, but I figure that can't hurt, right? We can have it from midnight to 5 for 3 nights. Landis chuckled. What people won't do for a chance to be in a movie. It's frightening. Well, I can use him as one of the doctors, and we can shoot him early the first night. That way he'll be out of our hair after the first hour. Neil Bugmere pushed the script at Buzzy. "Read," he said. Buzzy ordered an extra dry martini, which he referred to as an ice-cold see-through, and another beer, and sat back, the script in his hands. He knew what to look for and could read a script in less time than most people could read a menu. He began to plow through it, raising an eyebrow now and then. Eddie, the bartender, cleared away the remains of his lunch. After 20 minutes, 2 more ice-cold see-throughs and another beer, Buzzy looked up and smiled. "This is pretty good, you know." Landis put his hand on Buzzy's shoulder and said, "That's what I've been telling you. Fruitcake here does good work." Neil smiled. At first, Neil's elaborate costumery had put Buzzy off. Buzzy's homophobic impulses flared at the sight of a man in a dress. Neil patiently explained to him that he was not a homosexual, just a cross-dresser. He loved women as much as Buzzy did, he insisted. He just liked to wear their clothes. It took many months, but eventually Buzzy got to the point where he could work with Neil. Landis was the man who brought them together. He discovered all sorts of interesting and odd people. Hollywood, not only the film capital of the world, but the weirdo capital of the world. Buzzy knew Landis Woodley loved unusual people. He seemed to surround himself with them, which further alienated him from the old guard of the movie business. Hollywood was trying to clean up its image. Independent filmmakers like Landis Woodley, Mavericks and Rebels were always treated the same. First, the big studios tried to drive them out of business. Then, if that didn't work, they bought them out. Landis had had a few modest successes, and he really knew how to stretch a budget. Guys like that were always in demand in Tinseltown. In fact, most director-producers wouldn't even attempt a film on the kinds of budgets Landis routinely worked with. The Woodley modus operandi went like this. He'd start shooting a film, usually on a minuscule, unrealistic budget, then run out of money in mid-production. At that point, he'd gotten the investors in too deep, and he would beg, borrow, or steal to complete the project. He'd oversold a picture more than once. As a consequence, he had very few repeat investors. Landis Woodley was not a money person. For that, he had Sol Kravitz. Sol was the kind of guy who could go out and make investment money materialize out of thin air. He'd been successful in the fledgling peep show business and various other shady permutations of the film industry. It wasn't really actually the movie game, but it did involve the concept of film. Sol loved Landis, and he viewed the younger man as a potential superstar. Landis came to depend on Sol for the raw material that ran his 2-bit B-movie empire cash. Buzzy knew who signed the checks. Sol had raised the funds to start Cadaver, and Landis was off and running. The drive-ins were hot, and Landis had a deal with RKM to distribute the movie. Even after the lackluster performance of Attack of the Haunted Saucer, he'd managed to talk RKM into rolling the dice one more time. As he sat in the cool, dark confines of Barney's Bar on this muggy Thursday afternoon in the heart of Hollywood, Buzzy thought about Landis's annual Halloween party, a tradition in the hills above Beechwood Avenue. The party was a debauch, pure and simple. Landis and his friends were perverts. Liquor and reefers were everywhere. Many an aspiring starlet had been led down the devil's path by that combination, liberally applied by the charming Landis Woodley, with the assurance that nothing bad would happen, and that the young lady would be considered for the lead role in his next epic. If that didn't work, Dr. Buzzy Haller could always be called upon for more exotic intoxicants. More importantly, the party gave Buzzy and Landis a chance to try outrageous stunts on unsuspecting people. Their goal was to shock and frighten. Of course, they filmed everything. Party scenes from last year showed up in Haunted Saucer. Buzzy was sure that this year's performance would be the best ever. Neil got up to go to the restroom, and that was always interesting. Today he chose the men's room and avoided any unpleasantness. The bar was empty at this point. The other patrons had departed, and Neil, ever the diplomat, had decided to forgo his usual powder room scene and just urinate quickly. When he returned, Buzzy was finishing up the last few pages of dialogue. "Better than the mummy's brain," Buzzy said, feeling the effects of the martinis. "Better than slave of the sadist and Satan's daughter." Landis beamed. "That's what I thought. Can you start today?" Buzzy nodded. "I'm way ahead of you, Woody. I've got the monster stuff all ready to go, and I have some nice ideas for the zombies." Landis nodded. If Buzzy said it was ready, it was ready. The two men had the highest professional regard for each other. "I'm using the sets from Satan's Daughter. What happened was, after RKM spent all that money on those beautiful sets, I wanted to shoot another movie right away before they tore it all down. It seemed like such a waste. So I got Neil to come up with this Cadaver script, and the only other scene we need is in the morgue. Shit, this movie just about shoots itself. We don't have to build a single set." "And I came up with the plot line," bragged Neil, his makeup now reapplied with Marine Corps precision. "Fruity, you're a genius," Buzzy shouted across the empty room. Roberta Bachman got ready to go out. Her roommate, Janice Devon, an aspiring actress, stood behind her as she looked in the mirror. Both were in their early 20s and attractive. "Are you sure you want to go?" Janice asked. "Sure, I'm sure. What's the big deal? Besides, I heard that a lot of big stars are going to be there." Janice put a hand on Roberta's shoulder, causing Roberta to stop applying her cosmetics and look up at her. "Just be careful, okay?" Roberta went back to her eyeshadow. "I'll be careful. Why are you so sure something's going to happen?" "Because I've heard all about Landis Woodley. He's a sick man who makes sick movies." Roberta laughed. Her delicate titters were as fresh and clear as stream water. She was just out of college and eager to get ahead. Her 3-week-old first job as a publicist for RKM Motion Picture Company excited her. Everything seemed new and different now that she was out on her own. Although she'd lived in Hollywood all her life, this was her first taste of freedom. Raised off Melrose Avenue in a tiny house with her mother and Auntie Clarice, she'd often dreamed of what it would be like to have her own apartment. Now, not only did she live by her own rules, she worked for one of the hottest new motion picture companies in town. Life for her had never been better. "Anyway, Buzzy Haller is a very nice man," she said convincingly. Janice turned away. She went over to the window and looked out. "It gets dark so early these days. I hate winter." "It's not winter yet, just Halloween," Roberta said. "Don't you think your costume is a little risque?" Janice took a cigarette from the ornate brass case on the table and lit it with a lighter that looked like a gun. She blew the smoke out dramatically, pausing to replace the fighter, then turned back to Roberta. Her image, much smaller now in the mirror from across the room, stared back at her best friend with thinly disguised disgust. "I'm going as a cigarette girl. What's wrong with that?" Janice frowned. "It's just that it's so sexy. I mean, there's more of you showing than costume." "Oh, for God's sake, Jan, this is the 1950s. People are much more modern now. Believe me, there will be sexier costumes than this one, I'm sure. This is Hollywood. Don't you want to come with me?" "Forget it. Besides, I wasn't invited." Roberta went back to her face, glancing at the clock on her vanity and making a mental note that she only had 50 minutes left before Buzzy showed up at her door. Janice kept the pressure on, pacing the room, appearing and disappearing in the mirror as she moved in and out of the field of vision. "I heard that Buzzy Haller smokes reefers," she said. "Come on, Jan," came the reply. That's just a stupid rumor. They say that about half the men in Hollywood these days. God knows he drinks enough, she continued. No more than anybody else I know, Roberta countered. Are you crazy? Janice snapped. That man sucks up martinis like ginger ale. Aren't you overreacting to what Mary said? Janice took another deep drag off the unfiltered Chesterfield, leaving a crimson lipstick ring, and crossed the room. Mary should know, she works at the commissary. She said he drinks every day, flirts with all the girls, and gambles. Roberta stopped doing her eyes again and turned to face Janice. The smoke from her cigarette curled seductively around her head, looking suddenly like a crown of thorns. Will you calm down? God, it's like you're my mother or something. If anything happens, anything, I'll grab a cab back home in a flash, Roberta explained evenly. Well, Janice stubbed out her cigarette and exhaled sharply in her best Bette Davis impersonation. Come on, Jan, it's okay. Buzzy Haller is a very nice man. He's taking me to a party where there will be lots of other people. What could possibly happen? Roberta finished off her sentence with a sobering look, designed to assuage her friend's fears. A lot, Janice replied, unconvinced. Like what? He could get fresh with you, lure you into one of the bedrooms, get you drunk, and slip you his pepperoni. His what? They burst into a torrent of giggles. Tad Kingston had no talent, at least that's what everybody said behind his back. To his face, they were more diplomatic. Lots of potential, the agents would say, or the right looks. Never, he's a great actor. And it was the truth. Thaddeus Willinger, a.k.a. Tad Kingston, couldn't act his way out of a paper bag, but he did not aspire to be a great actor. What Tad Kingston wanted was to be a movie star. In Hollywood, that was a much more realistic goal. Tad did have the looks. He'd toyed with being a rock and roll singer, but his inability to carry a tune turned off the record companies. So Tad embarked on a career as a matinee idol. He found an agent who liked his face, had some pictures printed, and waited by the phone. It never rang. He ran into Landis Woodley at a party, and the brash filmmaker took him under his wing. He wound up with the lead teenager part in Hot Rod Monster, Blood Ghouls of Malibu, and Attack of the Haunted Saucer. The kids loved him. Overlooking his massive shortcomings as an actor, they focused on his hair. He had what Landis Woodley referred to as star-quality hair. It was blonde, longish for its day, swept back, and greasy. It flared with intricate patterns back from his forehead. His pompadour cascaded in front like a frozen waterfall, then swept back severely on the sides and ended up in a classic DA. He spent hours working it with a comb. If he'd spent as much time learning his lines, he might have gotten more work. His credits with Woodley probably helped him lose more jobs than gain them around Hollywood. Tad was wolfing down a ham sandwich his mother had made him when the phone rang. The telephone in the hallway of his mother's house was black and heavy. It sat on a tiny table next to the most uncomfortable chair his mother owned. That was by design, of course. Tad knew her reasoning, that he would spend less time talking on the telephone and thereby reduce the amount of her monthly phone bill. Coupled with the postage stamp-sized table, it was as severe an environment as she could muster for conversation. None of it mattered to Tad. He didn't give two shits for comfort, and he talked as long as he liked. Whenever he liked, regardless. She kept the ringer at its loudest setting, and it reverberated off the flowered wallpaper with eardrum-rattling intensity. Tad picked up the weighty receiver. "Hello? Tad Kingston speaking." Landis Woodley sounded pissed off. "Hey, Kingston, I heard you're not bringing Lana Wills to the party tonight, and I thought I'd call you and find out for myself." "Mr. Woodley, I know you wouldn't screw me like that, would you? I went out of my way to line this up for you. Lana Wills is hot now. Tad stammered. He decided to be forthright and just tell the truth, an ill-advised strategy when dealing with Landis Woodley. His voice quivered slightly as he said, Mr. Woodley, actually I was going to take Becky Sears. Landis snapped back without dropping a beat. Becky Sears? Are you crazy? She's just a script girl, a nobody. Lana Wills is a star. Tad sat in the uncomfortable chair and put his elbow on the tiny tabletop. He could sense his mother upstairs listening. The old lady really loved to eavesdrop. It was the only way she ever got any information on her son. But I like Becky Sears, Tad whined. Tough shit. You're taking Lana Wills and that's that. I'm sending a limo over to pick you up and you better be ready. Tad could hear his mother wheezing on the landing above him. The cramped house and narrow staircase carried sounds like a hollow tube. Geez, Mr. Woodley, what am I going to tell Becky? Landis laughed. I don't care. Hell, tell her the truth, that you have no say in this, that you're a piece of shit, and that I made you do it. But she's such a sweet girl. It's going to break her heart. Landis sighed. Kid, you're hopeless. You know that? Have you seen Lana Wills? She's built like a brick shithouse. Jesus, Tad, every other guy in America wants a piece of that. The boys over at RKM insist that she go with you. She's in Son of Tarzan, and they want her name out there for everybody to see. I just can't tell Becky. It's gonna break her heart. She'll cry. Landis sighed again, this time deeper and with more resignation than usual. Okay, I'll tell her. What's her number? Would you? Geez, that would be great. Mr. Woodley, you know I'd do anything for you. Cut the crap, kid. I'll do your dirty work, but don't think you can get away with this shit forever. Here's the deal. I can only afford one limo, so it's gonna be for both of my stars. Get this, you're double dating with Luboff, the Grand Master of Horror and the young apprentice going off to the party of the year together. He's taking some bimbo from Paramount and you're with Wills. I'm gonna send a photographer over to get some shots of you getting ready, you know, combing your hair, stuff like that. Star gets ready for Fright Night Bash. Brilliant, huh? Tad blanched. The thought of sharing a vehicle with the dirty old man made him queasy. Luboff? Oh man, do I have to? Shit, the old man's always getting loaded and putting his hand on my knee. Plus, he smokes those disgusting cheap cigars. Landis cut in. I bought him some good ones for the party. Can't have the star smoking garbage in public. Tad stopped. He knew he had no choice. All right. He sighed. What time is the limo coming? 8. Be ready. I'll tell Luboff to keep his hand out of your lap. You'll call Becky? Sure. Tad heard the phone click. Landis never said goodbye. He just ended a conversation like he was picking up a phonograph needle. Tad had grown used to it. He owed Landis Woodley his professional life and didn't complain about the hundreds of antisocial, crude and humiliating things he did all the time. Would Landis call Becky? Tad hoped so. He really liked Becky, but was too spineless to call her himself. He eased the receiver back into its cradle and stood up. His mother called from upstairs. Thaddeus, are you going out somewhere? Tad shouted up the stairs, a darkness creeping into the voice that he saved exclusively for her. Yes, Mother. Landis Woodley smiled wickedly. All seemed in readiness. Tonight's party was going to be his best yet. He would really give these people something to remember. The king of low-budget horror was going to deliver the goods. He looked down at his list of calls. The numbers blurred. He ran his finger down the list and stopped at only the most important names. Damn, he thought. I need a secretary for all this shit. It's too much work. He had already forgotten about calling Becky Sears. Tad Kingston and his pimply adolescent problems didn't rate very high on his list. The kid would just have to learn to take care of his own butt. Buzzy Haller entered the room and gave him the thumbs-up sign. "Ready to go, boss," he said. "Beautiful," Woodley said through his teeth. "How about a drink before we change?" They drifted into the living room, where a full wet bar waited for customers. Landis automatically prepared 2 vodka martinis, very dry, no olives. He handed one to Buzzy. "I gotta tell you, Woody," Buzzy said honestly, "there's nothing like an icy see-through." Landis held his glass up and said, "Here's to old H.P. Lovecraft." "Who?" Landis smiled. "Just a guy." Buzzy took a sip and made a smacking sound with his lips. "Ah, perfect. You always get just the right ratio of vodka to vermouth." They drank as Buzzy scanned the guest list. He tapped the paper and said, "We're gonna scare the living shit out of these people tonight." Landis nodded. "You think we'll get into trouble? I mean, this is some pretty heavy stuff." Buzzy raised his glass and winked. "Or, who cares? It's worth it to shake these assholes up a little." For Albert Beaumont was haunted. He didn't know how, but he did know why. As the world's leading Satanist and leader of the First Satanic Church of America, he'd been doing research on the nature of the devil in different cultures when something unexpected happened. He overturned one rock too many. He stood on the sidewalk in front of the fledgling Los Angeles International Airport and squinted into the hazy sunshine. Albert was a tall, distinguished man in his late 40s, always well-dressed, with a European flair. He wore a neatly trimmed goatee and kept his silver-streaked brown hair combed straight back. He cut a handsome, striking figure. His daughter was late. She was always late. For a college student at UCLA, she didn't seem to have much of a mind for punctuality. Didn't they require her to go to her classes on time? He smiled when he thought about the way her mother had been when they first met in San Francisco 22 years ago. Albert studied anthropology with a minor in botany at the University of California in Berkeley. Thora's mother was a botany student as well. Now that woman had been a stickler about being on time. She chided him endlessly about being late on their first date. He learned his lesson and was seldom late after that. When she died 10 years later, he was late for the funeral. Thora took after Albert. Over the years, he'd adjusted to the point where he expected it, even planned for it. Except today it was a nuisance. His plane had arrived a few minutes early, he'd cleared customs in record time, and now he was anxious to get home. In his suitcase were artifacts that could change the way Western civilization thought about God forever. He shifted it from one hand to another, not wanting to put it down even for a second, for fear that something might happen to it. He need not have worried. The battered brown leather bag looked sufficiently scruffy not to attract the least attention from the usual airport thieves. Even if it were stolen, the artifacts he prized above all else were nothing anyone would know the value of. Anyone but a trained anthropologist, that is. To Albert, it was a miracle. The 2 20-inch silver alloy pieces, hand-polished and odd in appearance, had amazing powers. They were tucked away in his bag, wrapped in towels and tied with a piece of rawhide. The customs inspector didn't even bother opening them. He just waved Albert through the turnstile with a yawn and a look of bored indifference. Albert fished a cigarette out of his breast pocket and lit it with a flick from his monogrammed Zippo lighter. It always worked on the first try. He trusted that lighter like he trusted nothing else in this godless world. Godless? Well, maybe not, thought Albert. Now that he'd seen it with his own eyes, he couldn't say for sure what omnipotent beings ruled our festering universe. He knew about one for sure. The devil was real. Every culture has a religion, and every religion has a devil, or so it seemed to Albert when he began his scholarly quest to catalogue and investigate every reference. It turned into an enormous job that kept him busy for years, but Albert had a mission. He wanted to establish the face of Satan around the world. He wanted to compare and understand what characteristics stayed the same from culture to culture. Maybe among those statistics a pattern would emerge, a common thread of belief in the Prince of Darkness that Albert could use to conjure him up. So far, his best efforts seemed to fall on deaf ears. Like the monk who prayed for years in vain and never saw the slightest sign that his lifetime of prayers had been answered or even heard by an indifferent God, Albert had been trying to raise the devil without success. He reasoned that a universal approach might work. After all, there was really no such thing as good and evil, just man's interpretation of it. A scientific approach was called for. It was the modern way, and in 1957, modern was the name of the game. People everywhere were searching for new ways to do things. Albert saw himself as a pioneer. He was, after all, the first person to establish the only openly satanic church in America, a bold move in any era. In his research, he'd found no fewer than 1,865 references to Satan, spanning hundreds of cultures. There were many similarities too. Belief in hell, eternal damnation, demons, demonic possession, sin and evil incarnate seemed to be universal concepts. For Albert Beaumont, it was vindication. He felt a breakthrough was just around the corner. His ultimate goal, of course, was to conjure the Prince of Darkness, to be the first in modern times to commune with him. His search went on for years. "Do what thou wilt shall be the extent of the law," he said, muttering his favorite Aleister Crowley quotation. In South America, in the high country of Peru, on the misty plains beyond Machu Picchu, he found something truly staggering, truly magical. There, cut off from the outside world, lived a tribe of Indians who worshipped a demon they could summon whenever they wanted through the use of an ingenious device. His liaison to the local scientific community, a smarmy little man named Carlos from the anthropology department at the University of Lima, had mentioned it to him in his hotel room in Ecuador. He had arrived there en route to Peru to study some quaint local human sacrificial customs among the native population. The Ecuadorians were less than enthusiastic when he approached them to photograph their rituals. He then prepared to travel to Peru and explore the mountainous regions there. In addition to his anthropological pursuits, Albert planned to study the native flora, taking specimens of the numerous unknown and uncatalogued species along the way. Albert's encyclopedic knowledge of flowering plants, especially the narcotic and hallucinogenic varieties, had proved valuable. In the past, he'd sold the rights to several of his discoveries to pharmacological companies, offsetting the cost of his expeditions. Albert's hotel room sweltered in the oppressive tropical heat. Humidity so intense that it made the wallpaper peel debilitated him. He was reduced to sitting on the rattan chair beneath the ceiling fan and drinking whatever chilled beverages he could procure. Today it was beer, tepid and barely cooler than room temperature. He offered one to Carlos, who greedily accepted and paced the room as he drank. The ceiling fan turned agonizingly slowly, stirring only the faintest breeze, imperceptible but for the slight cooling of the sweat on his brow. "It is a Stone Age tribe, Dr. Beaumont," Carlos said hopefully. Albert had passed himself off as a doctor of anthropology from USC, referring to himself as Dr. Beaumont. No one asked to see any verification, and so far no one had bothered to check his background. Albert Beaumont certainly looked like a professor. His goatee, close cropped to fetishistic proportions, gave him an intellectual and slightly evil persona. The overall effect was convincing. And then there was Albert's natural intelligence and upper-class background. Carlos had no reason to doubt his authenticity. Albert had loosened his tie and removed his lightweight summer jacket. His white suit was wrinkled and moist, soiled here and there by the general dirtiness of the country. White, though reflective of heat, was an impractical color for clothes here. His shirt stuck to his back, defined in geographic detail by the sweat-stained suspenders that hung from his shoulders. As he leaned forward, the pattern of rattan was branded lightly on his back. Albert had been uncomfortable every minute he'd been here. How could these people live like this? Carlos didn't seem to mind the heat. He swigged down the warm beer and talked excitedly. Albert could smell Carlos's body scent. It lathered the air with an odor of oniony sweat. He wondered why these people didn't use colognes. The air barely stirred. Albert mopped at his brow with a dirty white handkerchief. He watched the research assistant pace. For his part, Albert thought Carlos boorish and common. The little man seemed only interested in the payment that Albert had mentioned for reliable information that might add to his research. A tribe so ancient that no one knows how long they have been there. The ruins near their village date back to pre-Inca times. Albert seemed mildly interested until he learned of their methodology. Then he was intrigued. He would spend much money and many days searching for the tribe to see with his own eyes if Carlos had reported the truth. This tribe believed that all things, all emotions, and all spirits were born of vibrations. They worshipped the vibrations and had kept a detailed account of every spirit they had conjured over the centuries and what vibration contacted it. It was the combination of vibrations that did the trick. They did it through the use of long metallic vibrating devices that resembled tuning forks. As the fork was struck and resonated, then combined with another vacillation wave coming from a second fork, it summoned forth an entity that was sympathetic to that frequency. Different combinations produced different results. Certain frequencies oscillated between themselves, cancelling each other out. Their discord made new vibrations, and those rang with unknown dissonance. The effect built on itself. Two certain forks, Albert was told, two mysterious antiquities from the dawn of man, had the miraculous power that, once struck, together, made contact with the other side. The other side of what? Albert wondered. Carlos said it was a demon who came forth in the form of a serpent. A snake god. To Albert, of course, that entity represented something else entirely. The face of Satan. It appeared in their drawings as a serpent, complete with horns, forked tongue, and a tail. Familiar turf for Albert. "Will this information be worth money to you?" asked Carlos. "I have gone to great expense to contact a man who can help us. A medicine man. He can help us locate the tuning forks." Albert fanned himself with his notebook. Carlos grinned like a successful thief. To Albert, the entire experience of being in the room with Carlos had become unpleasant, but now, with this new information, Albert was revived. "Yes, Carlos, I think it could be worth something." Carlos caught his breath. "How much?" he asked. We'll see, said Albert. "I think," said Carlos, "that I can persuade this man to do business with us. For a price." Albert immediately set forth on an expedition to the high plateaus to find the sacred tuning forks and unlock their secrets. Carlos arranged for a translator guide to accompany them. For weeks they climbed and searched, enduring hardships of every description, to reach the hidden village. Albert gathered plant specimens as he went, amazed at the dizzying number of varieties. He discovered a giant flower that greatly resembled the Papaver somniferum. or opium poppy. The seed pods had grown to twice their normal size. Albert named the new discovery Papaver somniferum gigantus Beaumont and collected as many pods as he could fit in his specimen bag. This discovery alone could pay for the expedition, he thought. When at last Albert discovered the backward, isolated Stone Age tribe, he went about trying to obtain the tuning forks. Like most 20th century men, Albert grossly underestimated the power of the spirit world and blindly called forth the power of evil as if he were placing a long-distance phone call. That's when his problems really started. It began the first night he was in the tribal village. The high priest, whom he had made an instant effort to patronize, invited him to watch as he used the summoning devices to conjure up the snake god. The tuning forks were not kept hidden. In fact, they were kept in a hut in the center of the village, in the open, where everyone in the village could see them. No one, not even the enemies of the tribe, dared touch them except the high priest. Fear could be one hell of a deterrent, Albert decided. The living conditions within the village were deplorable, yet the hut that housed the tuning forks stayed clean and well maintained. The sacred objects seemed to be the center of village life. Albert got his first look at the tuning forks as the sun faded over the ridge behind the village. It illuminated the square in front of the hut with golden twilight. The high priest removed the forks from their leather pouches and held them over his head for all to genuflect. The people of the village became very excited at their unveiling, and although Albert could not know what they were saying, he sensed their fear and reverence. The people bowed down with their foreheads to the ground. They chanted and prayed, whispering like leaves in the wind. Albert stepped forward and examined the two objects with the appraising eyes of a scientist. The sun exploded off the polished metal surfaces with the intensity and brilliance of fire. They were, without a doubt, the most curious antiquities he had ever seen. They resembled two tuning forks, the type used by musicians. One was slightly larger than the other, the bigger of the two being about 2 feet in length. The other appeared to be a scaled-down version of the first, about 15 inches in length. Both forks were of the same design, a matched set of 2 U-shaped silver bars, roughly 1 inch in diameter, bent in the middle. The 2 prongs ran parallel, separated by 1 inch of space. At the top of the elbow, there was a perforation through which a leather strap had been threaded. The tuning fork was thus hung so that it might vibrate freely. At the 4 ends were unusual designs that caught Albert's attention. There, sculpted intricately by hands of talent, were 4 snake heads, accurate in every detail. The heads all seemed to be the same. They were all bearing fangs. These tuning forks appeared to be constructed in a manner inconsistent with the level of skill of the locals. Albert felt sure that they were the work of some older, more advanced culture. The surface of the silver had been meticulously polished. It wasn't perfect, as a machined modern piece would have been, but it looked damn close. The tolerances were obviously hand-wrought. The striker was an animal's cloven hoof. After the sun had set, the priest selected a man from the village, and against the victim's will, he was dragged forward and tied to a stake set firmly in the ground. This, only after much protesting and lamenting, was met with cautious resignation by the rest of the villagers. The unfortunate man's fate appeared sealed, and no amount of argument would change it. A ring of wood and dried shrubbery was placed around both the man and Albert's party, and lit with a torch of burning pitch. All those involved in or witnessing the ceremony were within the circle of flame. In the center stood the tied figure. The flickering light of the fire played across the man's terrified face. He screamed and pleaded in an unintelligible tongue, his limbs straining valiantly against the rough fiber of the rope to the point where it cut into his skin and blood began to ooze. The priest stepped forward and marked the victim's forehead with ashes. Albert's native translator began to shake and seemed mortally afraid of what was about to transpire. He became reluctant to translate the words of the high priest, reluctant to be a party to the damnation of this poor creature's soul. The victim howled and fought the bonds that restrained him. Albert had to shout at his translator to continue. Within the ring of fire, the priest, his assistant, the translator, and Albert stood facing the center. The bound man continued to struggle. The high priest said a few words, chanted what Albert believed to be the name of the demon, then struck the larger metal fork with the cloven hoof striker. It made an unbelievable sound, a low vibration that seemed to rattle Albert's very soul. The ominous tone filled the night. The insect stopped singing. The sound grew until the vibration became painful to hear. The priest then struck the second fork, and its vibration joined the first, oscillating in and out of the sympathetic harmonics of the two wildly dissonant notes. The combination began to have a strange effect on Albert. Intoxicating and hypnotic, it insinuated its way through his eardrums and into his brain, cancelling out all else. With an effect like rolling thunder, Albert felt his internal organs vibrate. He felt as if he were standing next to railroad tracks while a train rumbled past. He blinked, trying to hold back a steady flow of tears that began involuntarily to stream down his face. Looking around, he could see that every man in the circle was crying. The tuning forks hummed with a sustained tone that defied the laws of physics. His eyes were drawn to a shimmering cloud hovering a few feet above the tied man's head. The head of a huge, glistening, horned snake materialized, coming into focus before Albert's incredulous eyes. It wavered for a moment, then snapped onto the body of the bound man with a terrible finality, wrapping its wet coils around the hapless native and crushing him like a piece of meat. The coils flexed, then tightened. Albert listened for the sound of bones snapping, but the only snapping he heard was the crackle of the fire as it sputtered around them. A terrible metamorphosis then took place. The sinuous body of the snake began to blend into the body of the man, melding into his shape and taking on the characteristics of a human form. The blue-green scales melted into arms, legs, a torso. The form of a human emerged from the coils of the reptile as if being sculpted from living tissue by a master artisan. Albert wiped his weeping eyes as the snake man was born before him, the skin reptilian, iridescent, but with a form suggesting humanity. It was a grotesque melding of the two entities that Albert now beheld, half snake demon, half man. The body of a human, the head of a snake. It twisted and pivoted on its slender neck, watching the people and the fire. A forked tongue flickered the air around it. The lidless eyes seemed to rotate as it studied the scene. What Albert watched was impossible. The snake head looked at Albert. Its whip-like tongue danced in his direction. Albert stood transfixed as, one by one, the ropes snapped, and the changeling stepped away from the tree. The priest remained rooted to the ground, but the others present, including Albert and the translator, faded back, away from the center and closer to the wall of fire. The flame barrier held them, just as the coils of the serpent had held the sacrifice. They were trapped. The snake creature stepped nearer, its tongue darting in and out, and Albert could smell a fetid, unpleasant odor coming from it. The priest cried out something, and the translator, shocked from his terror by the urgency in the priest's voice, interpreted and shouted at Albert, "Stay within the circle of flames." Albert's back was now hot. The hair on the back of his head began to singe as he pressed closer to the fire. He wanted to run, to jump through the wall of flame and take his chances, but he did not. He realized the terrible beauty of what he saw, the heart-stopping monstrosity of it. Without a doubt, without an ounce of uncertainty, he knew he was looking at the face of Satan. When, after almost an hour, the serpent dematerialized and the fires burned down, the tribesman lowered the dazed victim from the stake. He began to weep, and after a short time became hysterical. They dragged him before the priest, who at first comforted the man, then unceremoniously put him to death. To prevent the demon's return into the same body, he explained to Albert through the interpreter. "Does the host body have to be human?" Albert asked, concerned for the victims. "Could it be an animal?" The priest nodded as the question was translated. "Yes, it can be any living thing, but only man can bring the full power of the demon." That night, as Albert lay in his sleeping bag, his mind raced. The incredible event he'd witnessed had left him shaken but also exhilarated. He schemed to get his hands on the tuning forks. He thought about offering to buy them, but quickly rejected the idea. The concept of money meant nothing to these people. He considered various scenarios to trick the priest and the villagers, but dismissed each one. All the while, the tuning forks tempted him, unguarded in the center of the village. He came to the conclusion that he would have to steal them. Albert abhorred violence, and he rejected any thought of using force to take them. He had a rifle, but that would not be effective against the entire village if they turned on him. He decided that the best approach would be to purloin the tuning forks under cover of night and make his escape. The only problem was the natives, who, better suited to the jungle than he, would quickly overtake him in a chase. So Albert devised a plan. He noticed that the villagers all drew their water from a single well. Albert prepared a narcotic extract of Papaver somniferum gigantus beaumont and surreptitiously poisoned the well. Over the course of the next 24 hours, he successfully drugged the entire village. When the natives were all asleep, he put the tuning forks in his pack and left the plateau. Knowing that the villagers would sleep for days, he nevertheless hastened his retreat through the jungle. Albert opened his eyes as the blaring of an automobile horn awakened him from his daytime nightmare. He looked up to see an attractive teenage girl driving a green and white Pontiac Star Chief convertible. She had the top down, and her blonde ponytail bobbed in the breeze. His daughter had arrived. He smiled and waved when she called his name. "Oh, Daddy, would you please hurry up? I'm late." "That doesn't surprise me," he said as he slung his bag into the back seat. "Welcome home," she chirped. "It's good to be home, Thora," he replied. "A woman's been calling for you." Albert looked bemused. "A woman?" "Yeah, she said it's really important that you call her as soon as you get in." The car pulled away, cutting into the traffic like a speedboat. Albert leaned over and kissed his daughter on the cheek before the inertial force pinned him back into the vinyl seat. "Does she have a name?" he wanted to know, genuinely curious. "Yeah, get this," she said as the Pontiac careened into a turn. "It's that late-night horror show host on Channel 2, the one who looks like a sexy ghoul." "Devila?" "Uh-huh. Isn't that exciting? She's a big star." Albert knew about Devila. He'd seen her many times on television, hosting a plethora of dreadful movies while she vamped for the cameras. He liked her look-pale skin and clingy black dress, with a witchy silver streak in her long, straight midnight hair. But he had never met the woman. She was very big with the beatniks and the teenagers in Los Angeles. Albert Beaumont wondered what the connection could be. A horn blasted as his daughter swerved in front of another car. Why would she call me? Thora weaved in and out of traffic with the brazen skill of a New York City taxi driver. Albert hung on for dear life, having forgotten how aggressive his daughter could be behind the wheel. "She wants to take you to a Halloween party." Albert laughed. "That's absurd." "Oh, Daddy, you are the most handsome available bachelor in town, you know," she gushed. "I rather doubt that," he replied, flattered by her assessment. "But seriously, why me?" "Well," said Thora proudly, a flash of smile splitting her face, "she said that you're the scariest, sexiest man in Los Angeles, and that she's the scariest, sexiest woman. She said everybody's afraid of you, and that you'd be the perfect date for this party she's going to tonight." Darkness fell around the Landis Woodley funhouse like a lead curtain, further sealing it off from the world of sanity and reason. Even though the clock showed 8 o'clock on Halloween night, no trick-or-treaters came to the door. Not that Landis cared. If any costumed children ever did find the uninviting grey stucco building down from the road and visible only from certain angles, he would have ignored them. Landis hated to answer the door. He had once thought of having a doorbell made that played back a tape recording of a dog barking and an angry voice shouting, "Go away, we don't want you here." He had Buzzy Haller go so far as to actually tape the warning, but he never got around to doing the wiring. Buzzy was much too important to Landis to waste his time working on small projects like that. Buzzy made the productions run. He was the monster maker, and, as Landis insisted, without a monster, you don't have a movie. Landis stood upstairs in his bedroom, putting the finishing touches on his Undertaker's black tux, when he heard the front door slam. "Buzz?" he shouted. "Yeah," came the reply. "Come on up." He heard the thumps of Buzzy Haller coming up the stairs, 2 at a time. "You'll never guess who's coming to the party, man." He gushed as he entered the room. Landis straightened his bow tie and cussed at his clumsiness. He ignored Buzzy, who continued talking. "Neil Cassidy. He's the cat who's the hero of the Jack Kerouac book, On the Road. You know, the one that just came out?" Landis finished with his tie and turned stiffly to face Buzzy. Buzzy whistled. "Nice monkey suit." "Thanks," came the terse reply. Landis looked at Buzzy, saw the scruffy blue jeans, cut-off grey sweatshirt and fake goatee. "Don't tell me the Beat Generation." "That's right, Woody. That's my costume this year. I'm a beatnik." Landis winced. "Complete with reefers," Buzzy concluded, and pulled out an envelope with 6 rolled joints in it. He flashed it open and showed Landis. "You're incredible, Buzz. Where'd you get them?" Landis asked after taking a good look. "Some cats I know from San Francisco just blew into town. That's where I met Cassidy. The man's a legend. On the Road is the Bible of the Beats, man, and it's all about him." Landis was not visibly impressed. "What's with the term beatnik? Everything's got a nick at the end of it since that damn Sputnik went up 3 weeks ago. Christ, it's on the front page every day. It's even affected the way you talk." Buzzy laughed and removed one of the reefers from his envelope and lit it. He took a huge drag on it and held it in. As he exhaled, and a cloud of intoxicating blue smoke filled the room, he said, "Sputnik, Nutnik, Beatnik, Neatnik, who cares?" In his hippest tone, he said, "The beats are all about beatitude, man. It's not about the beat, as in bongo drums. It's about beatitude, you know, being cool." Landis accepted the reefer from Buzzy and inhaled himself a dream. He rolled his eyes in a parody of Buzzy and said, "Crazy, man, crazy." Buzzy laughed. "You got it, Daddy-O. That's the reef, Chief." Roberta Bachman checked herself one last time and hurried to the window. She had heard a car door slam and thought it might be Buzzy Haller come to take her to the party. It wasn't. It was Janice's friend, Gladys. "Hi, Gladys," Janice said as she jerked open the door. "Hi, Jan. I got the popcorn." They hugged and spilled into the house, full of girlish good feelings and smiles. Roberta sat back down on the couch, smiled in Gladys's direction, and went back to the book she was reading. Gladys plunked herself down on the couch next to Roberta and whistled. "Wow, that's some sexy outfit. My mother wouldn't let me out of the house with something like that on." Her eyes widened in admiration. "And I don't know if I'd have the guts or the body for it anyway." Roberta adjusted her costume, slightly self-conscious now that Gladys had become the second person in 10 minutes to make a comment. "Well, my mother would have a heart attack too, but she's not here, is she? You guys are so lucky to have your own place. God, I would just die." Janice came in clutching her TV guide. "Popcorn's on." "What's on television tonight? Need you ask?" Janice and Gladys were both die-hard TV fans. They watched everything and knew all the actors and actresses on every show. Hollywood had taken it on the chin when TV became the #1 form of entertainment in America almost overnight. But the two girls didn't care. They loved TV as much as the movies. LA had simply shifted gears and was fast becoming the TV production capital of the world. To aspiring actresses like Janice and Gladys, it only meant more opportunities. And the guys were so cute. Let's see, Wagon Train, The Millionaire, Ozzie and Harriet. "I just love that Ricky Nelson. He is so handsome." Gladys jumped up. "Oh, didn't I tell you? I got an audition for that new show, Wyatt Earp." "Oh my God, Hugh O'Brien." Roberta frowned. Her friends were idiots. "You two are completely cracked, you know that? I mean, is that all you think about? These TV shows are as dumb as comic books." "What's wrong with comic books?" Janice asked. Roberta sighed. No hope. "Comic books are for children, just like those TV shows you like to watch. Oh, and I suppose Buzzy Haller, who works for the one and only Landis Woodley, a real Ingmar Bergman type, I might add, is a sensitive intellectual," Janice replied. "Well, all I'm saying is that TV is mostly fluff, and films are a little more stimulating. At least they have the potential to be. There are some great movies out there. It's an art form. TV's just throwaway stuff, free entertainment." Janice huffed. "Listen to you. Now you're putting down TV just because you're working for a film company. That's great. Take a look at yourself, Roberta. Tonight you're going to a Halloween party at a guy's house who makes movies like Attack of the Haunted Saucer, with another guy who makes rubber monsters, dressed as a sexy cigarette girl. And you've got the nerve to put down TV shows because they're too lowbrow for you. What's wrong here?" Roberta considered her answer as the doorbell rang. "There's Buzzy now," she said gratefully. "Einstein has arrived," Janice mocked. "Oh, leave her alone," said Gladys. "Let her have some fun. You're just jealous." Janice inhaled sharply, another one of her many overly dramatic stage moves, and made a derisive sucking sound she once saw Bette Davis make. She might have spoken again, getting in the last word, when Roberta opened the door, and there stood a tall, ruggedly handsome man with a blonde crew cut and a fake goatee. His sweatshirt was torn, and his jeans were faded. On his feet were sandals covering black socks. Roberta gasped. "Cool, baby, like wow. Nice costume," he said. His eyes scanned her body. The cigarette girl outfit revealed a tad more than Roberta felt comfortable with, and she was now unsure about her choice. This afternoon it had seemed so sophisticated, so exciting, so daring. Now it seemed like too much or too little, as the case may be. Roberta, stunned momentarily by his unabashed stare, looked down at her costume and blushed. She was embarrassed in two ways, once for herself and once for him. For a second there, she thought that Buzzy was actually dressed that way. Then she realized the beatnik get-up was his costume. Janice and Gladys stared from behind her, mouths agape. "It's a costume," she thought. "Thank God, it's only a costume." She would have died of embarrassment in front of her friends if this were the real Buzzy Haller. "Like my costume?" Buzzy asked. "A beatnik?" Roberta asked. "That's right, Daddy-O." "Cool," said Janice, deadpan. A sharp, acid look from Roberta cut Janice's tongue, and she refrained from further comment. Roberta introduced Buzzy to her friends. He seemed nice enough. His hands were clean, and his teeth were white. "It's interesting," said Roberta, "but why a beatnik?" "Why? You won't believe this, but Neil Cassidy is coming to the party." The three girls looked at each other blankly. "I'm sorry, Neil Cassidy?" "Yeah, from Frisco." More blank stares. "Jack Kerouac. The Book on the Road." "Neil Cassidy is the character Dean Moriarty." Janice rolled her eyes, Gladys looked confused, and Roberta smiled. "Oh," she said, "I've heard of that. It's a popular book right now, isn't it?" Buzzy tugged at his sweatshirt. "Popular is not a word I would use. Are you into Zen? You see, this whole thing just is. Why it is doesn't really matter, does it?" "What are you talking about?" Gladys asked. "I'm afraid I don't understand either," replied Roberta, stealing a glance at her friends to see if they were making faces yet. Buzzy was a bit peculiar. "Neil's gonna be at the party," Buzzy finished. "He's a Beat Generation hero." Roberta smiled again, this time sweetly and with real amusement. "Really? Just what does this Neil Cassidy do that makes him a Beat Generation hero?" "He drives around the country in old cars," came the unpretentious reply. Janice ran back to the kitchen, smelling burning popcorn, laughing like a maniac. Gladys was too interested in this strange man to laugh at him yet. Roberta got her coat. "So," Buzzy said as he led her out the door, "the reason I'm dressed as a beatnik is that the king of the beats is coming. It's in honor of him." "I see," Roberta said, and closed the door behind her. Albert Beaumont unpacked his artifacts first, before thinking of anything else. He placed them carefully in a cabinet behind the altar in his worship area. The familiar images of Satan that adorned the walls of his church were comforting. But now that he had seen the true face of the anti-god, all other representations were little more than quaint. He would change all that soon. He would show the world the real Prince of Darkness in all his glory. The cameras would roll, the skeptics would be forever silenced, the pilgrims would be converted, and his name, the name of Albert Beaumont, would live forever. He had no doubt he would become the most famous man in the world. And oh, the trouble he would make among the Christians. While their God hid and confused his legions, Albert's would appear on the television, proving his existence every Friday night. The priests would come to see for themselves, and Albert would laugh as their terror mounted. To the world's great religions, this would be their worst nightmare. Proof of the devil's existence, but not of God's. Albert could visualize the new hordes of followers he would attract and command. The new power he would gain might destroy weaker men. Not Albert, not the high priest of the world's biggest religion, the one that proves itself on demand. The only religion in the universe that could actually reach out and grab you. Thora stayed upstairs, listening to her collection of 45 RPM records, which she kept in a special case. She had over 80 different sides, mostly by all the new rock and roll artists that were exploding on the scene. Her favorite was that sullen, pouty, hillbilly cat, Elvis Presley. Albert couldn't tell the difference between Ricky Nelson and Fats Domino, but he loved the spirit of rebellion in youth, and this new music captured that spirit like fireflies in a jar. Little Richard boomed down the stairs. The Girl Can't Help It was as loud and raucous a record as Albert had ever heard. He smiled as he thought of his daughter jitterbugging around her room. Apart from the satanic worship, life in the Beaumont house seemed as normal as the Nelsons. The phone rang, and Albert answered it in his office in the den. "Hello?" A woman's voice, dark and husky, suggestive of gin and cigarettes, came down the telephone. "Albert Beaumont, this is Devler. Did your daughter tell you I called?" "Why, yes. I saw you on TV last month talking about your satanic church, and I thought you were absolutely marvelous." She pronounced the word marvelous as if it were marvelous, and Albert smiled without thinking. "Thank you," he said modestly. "You're a very handsome man, Mr. Beaumont." "Thanks, again. I hope this is not too forward of me. May I get right to the point?" Her voice sounded quite deep for a woman. "Yes, of course. Well, I understand that you're single, and I was wondering if you'd accompany me to a party in Hollywood tonight. There will be lots of publicity, and I think you might actually enjoy yourself." Albert sat down behind his desk. A ram's skull mounted on the wall in front of him glared down as if to say, "Don't mock me." The twisted horns and vacant eye holes had a haunted, disorienting effect on him. Sometimes he would stare at it for hours. "But why me, Miss Devler?" "Because it's good publicity. You scare people, Mr. Beaumont. So do I, although you do it on a much more serious level than I do. The photographers will be there, and any picture of me with you would be sure to get in all the papers. Not to mention Jonathan Luboff." Albert leaned back. "Luboff? The great Luboff? He'll be there?" "Oh, yes, and many more. Most of the people in the horror movie business will be there. It's Landis Woodley's house. His Halloween parties are famous." "Landis Woodley? He makes some pretty bad movies, doesn't he?" Albert's own voice sounded boorish compared to hers. "The worst. I should know. I show them all the time," she said. Albert wondered if she were wearing her Devler costume as she spoke to him. In a flash of cognition, he realized that she would definitely be wearing it that night to the party. The thought made him itchy. "What time would we have to arrive?" he asked slyly, barely suppressing his delight. "No particular time," she replied. "We're celebrities. We can go whenever we want. I've hired a hearse and driver for the evening." "Perfect," Albert crooned. "Absolutely perfect."